At the heart of our discussion is a question that is becoming increasingly important across industries. What does it take to move beyond simply delivering buildings and create destinations that people choose, remember, and return to? So to help us explore that question, I'll now hand the floor over to Kristian.
Great, thank you, Basi. So as this first part, we're going to bring some context to what we want to talk about. So the definition of success in the past 20 years has been very much that sort of more hygiene around sort of GFA, leasing, and efficiency. But as we're moving further into the future, it's very much looking about different types of success values that can bring to experience. So we're going to go through some of these sort of what sort of creates some of those impacts and causing some of those shifts where we're moving from all those hygiene sort of metrics into these future states. So the first thing that we look at is the audience, so the people that we want to bring part of our experience. So the customer and the people have changed, and that's been through technology has been a great innovator in that. And so as we're looking at that, we need to try and sort of tailor our experiences based off the customer needs and ambitions that have changed. So looking at the Philippines, the Philippines is a very young sort of demographic, especially in the working sort of sector. And then also thinking about a lot of urbanization has happened where people are now moving to the cities. And when they're moving into these cities, they're looking for more than just places to live, but experiences. There's also sort of geopolitical issues that are also causing a lot of shifts at the moment. And these have a lot of impacts in what's happening with the businesses and how brands are responding to it. Okay. But brands are also, with customers, with audiences, expectations, and younger audiences, especially Gen Z, are looking for brands to be a lot more authentic in the way they talk and interact with the people. And they look past just general greenwashing and looking for brands that really show purpose and have a heart on their sleeve. So a great example of this is Patagonia. But also when we're looking within the real estate space, there's a lot more requirements now and a lot more expectations from businesses, brands, and governments to really try and focus on more green, sustainable building methods and how we sort of accredit that and really show the proof of what's been happening. But then doing that does bring additional cost. And with the geopolitical issues, with higher increases in materials, and then also higher expectations of what people are looking for the buildings, cost is increasing. But within the real estate, there is a significant amount of investment as well, which is trying to sort of really improve the urban environments. So when we're looking at the cities as well, that urbanization and that growth in the cities and what people are expecting for cities, I sort of want to just come back to something that's actually been more personal to me. So this is my hometown in Rugby, which is in England. And it was a beautiful Georgian marketplace town. And every weekend people would be there. As a very heart of the community that people would go to. But of course, the outer town shopping centre comes along and completely rips out the heart of the town. And so now at the moment, there's a real focus on what we bring to the new city and the town, because at the moment it's got about 3 Costa coffee shops all next to each other, and then about 5 different vape shops and barbers. So now it's about really, and they're looking at this within the UK and really how to bring back to the town centre. And then when we're thinking back into Asia, where developments have not gone quite right, and this, we have areas where we have ghost cities, which is like Forest City in Johor, Peru, which was basically a city that had huge amounts of development and infrastructure, but no one turned up. And there's about, I think it has a population of about 1,000 people, and it's now becoming a centre for spam sort of mafias are now taking over the space. But where developments have gone right is a good example is Battersea Power Station. So Battersea Power Station, a heritage building, it was closed for about 40 years and no one touched it. And there was a huge amount of real estate that was never never realized, but eventually there was enough investment that came into the market that then really revolutionized the space in that area. And you got new mixed-use developments, you got sort of residential, retail, commercial all came into that space, and it became a real center for the area of Southwest London. And they did beautiful renovations and really focused on the architecture of the building. Other great examples are BGC, really sort of creating that urbanization in the space. The High Line in New York, how they transformed the west side of New York, connecting the Hudson Yards down to Chelsea. Ayala Triangle, which Mia will be talking a lot about, and really bring us some great insights on the development there. New Baru in Singapore, we don't always have to completely tear things down. There's ways that we can really do really lovely conservational work to spaces, where we can transform destinations as well in areas. So Doha Airport creating the Orchard, which is a quite transformational way of thinking of how people can use an airport space, especially one that's very transient. Different ways of programming shopping malls. Funan in Singapore, where they created the connections through cycle paths that go through. They created a climbing wall that just goes straight through, connecting all the different sort of levels and the different programs of F&B and retail. And then other areas where you can create more pop-up type experiences. So Box Park in London, they created these sort of container type sort of pop-up places where communities can come together. They have a lot of events that are happening in the space, like during the World Cup. This is where all the England fans were going to watch the matches. So I now pass back to Basti to fire off the questions.
Thank you, Kristian. Okay, so with all of the transition that's currently happening in a lot of developments, of course, outside the Philippines, and we are now focusing on the Philippines, the key takeaway to it is that developments are no longer judged because of the building itself, but also the experiences it can offer to the users, right? And also, there's one slide there that Kristian mentioned that destination completes people time. So now the question for all of us for this first part of our session is that what has fundamentally changed in the way we define a successful development? Now, this first question goes to Architect Jojo. So Architect Jojo, as a definition of a successful development evolves beyond simply delivering a functional building, what should designers be thinking about differently today?
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and happy to be here. I'm probably one of the oldest person in the room, having been in practice for more than 3 decades. So I've seen how clients view buildings, from products to providers of experiences. When I started practicing as an architect, whenever we start projects, the what we call project brief has always been functional. It has to be X number of square meters. It has to be this height, this material, this site boundary. And I've seen that kind of a brief evolve from something that's very technical into now something that defines the emotion and the experiences that the project has to provide to its target audience. And to me, that's refreshing, because now clients see, not only clients, but owners, multinationals see the value of not just creating buildings, but creating spaces that talk to its target audience. And also, many clients now see that the space that they occupy or the building that they build should be a reflection of their brand. So from a purely functional project, we're now seeing that many clients now appreciate the value of branding and experience creation. And they're now more deliberate in defining what that is in their particular project.
Thank you, Architect Jojo. I totally agree with a very experience-led spaces that we should be, adding up to the Philippines. But my next question goes to Architect Mia. Yeah. So Architect Mia, from a developer's perspective, as expectations of what makes a successful development continue to evolve, what are you seeing clients, investors, and communities value beyond the building itself?
Right. So First of all, I want to thank everyone for having me here. And yeah. And thanks, Jojo. You're the oldest person, and I'm the second oldest person here. Just a joke. Yeah. So, so like Jojo, I'm going to reminisce. You're all familiar with Ayala Land, and you're all familiar with the Makati CBD. And I think the Makati CBD can actually show you the transformation and how the thinking has changed over the years. Whereas I think the Makati CBD is around 60 or 70 years old now. And when it started way back in the 50s, the planning started. The urban planning thinking was much different then. It was the advent of technology at that time and of cars. So it was really designed to be very car-oriented. And in Ayala, we actually reinvent our estates from time to time. And now, we've actually, the Makati CBD has actually undergone several transitions, I think every 25 years or so. And right now, what we're looking at and what we've seen also in globally is that livability is a big thing. And even I know the experience of livability is very important. And that involves connectivity. We're always looking at how well connected is a central business district. We may have public transport, but it's still not enough, right? And we still choose to drive the car, which really contributes to a lot of traffic. We've also looked at, in the 1960s, the way Makati CBD was planned was that it was really, the trend then was to really separate zones, no? So the Makati CBD was mainly a workplace, right? Whereas today, we've really seen how important it is for cities, districts to be mixed use. So one of the changes that you will be seeing in the Makati CBD, which we have crafted in the Makati 2050 plan, is that you will really see more mixed uses. In the past, if you notice, it's really more of an office district. Everything is all about work. But in recent years, we've actually allowed in the zoning that you could actually have mixed-use buildings where you could have retail up to perhaps around 3 floors, residential as well as office. Because you can see how before it was all about work. Now in your CBD, it's no longer just a central business district, but it's actually more of a mixed-use social district, to quote Gensler. And it's not only just a workplace, but it's a place to work, live, and play as well. So you can see a lot of those innovations now and the changes that are going in the Makati CBD and in our various estates. Yeah.
Thank you, Architect Mia. Yeah, I can remember when I started working 2012.
Yeah.
I started selling Ayala Land properties
Oh,
before.
perfect.
And when I was selling it before, the idea of our pitch for the sales is that Makati CBD will be people-led in the next few years. And I think that is what is currently happening right now. I could see that there are more people who are encouraged to walk around Makati because of the connectivity, not just with public transportation, but also the amenities of how, especially Philippines is a very tropical country, right?
Yeah.
When it rains, we don't know where to go, especially we can't book Grabs and things like that. But there are now, because of the connectivity around the CBD, you could walk around, I think, from Triangle up to Circuit, hopefully.
Yeah.
They are slowly working on that kind of developments within the city.
Yeah. May I add as well? Yeah. So it's not just connectivity of vehicles. It's also, as you said, the walkability. If you work at the CBD, you'll notice that before, the direction in the 90s was that we need to separate the cars from the people. But now we're bringing back the people on the sidewalks, not just underground, but really we've opened what you call mid-block crossings. We can actually cross the Ayala Avenue and various streets. We're also having more. Ayala does have parks, the Ayala Triangle, Salcedo Park, Legazpi Park, but now we're connecting all of these parks into a real open space network. So that's what livability is all about. And we're really improving the governance. Jojo is part of the Maseo board, and as well as we're making sure that the soul and spirit of Makati is really felt. And you know that a lot of people they prefer to live in Makati because it has that personality. When we were doing studies and comparing BGC and Makati, a lot of the people in our FGDs would say Makati is like an old tita, and then BGC is like the young, hip, youth of today. So very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you, Architect Mia. But yeah, we've talked about design aspirations and also community expectations. Now I wanted to touch base on how do we translate those ideas into a reality? So this question goes to Engineer Jason. So Engineer Jason, from the delivery side of the industry, as projects become more experience-driven, what conversations needs to happen earlier to ensure that everyone is aligned on what success looks like?
Again, thank you, Paperspace, for inviting me. I always ask Karen, why was I invited here? But anyway, just a little bit of shameless plug. I want to also thank Casabella and Contract World. We were actually the PM for the renovation of their showroom. So I'm gonna speak tonight through the lens of a delivery and execution guy. So what we actually do when we start working on a project is we want to define what success means for the client, because success means differently for different stakeholders. So for example, for the designer, of course, they want to protect the design integrity. Of course, for the developer, success means probably lower capex and higher NPV and IRR. And then for branding or for marketing, you want to elevate customer experience and increase brand equity or brand loyalty. So the job of the PM is actually to reconcile everything and put together some sort of a hierarchy of success criteria, because definitely you cannot achieve everything. So what we actually do is we put together that success criteria, and at the end of the day, of course, we will sit down with the client and ask them how will they define success. So during those dialogues, they always say that success for them at the end of the day is about commercial performance. Of course, I'm gonna speak pragmatically. So while of course experience this destination is very important, at the end of the day, they're running a business. So for them, they attain commercial performance. One enabler is to complete the project on time, because that implies that they'll be able to realize sales earlier and rental revenue when you talk about retail and hospitality.
Thank you, Engineer Jason. So yeah, I think Engineer Jason summed it up already. I think the requirement or the goal would always depend on who the stakeholder is: developer, designer, marketing. So we have our own goals, but I think for me to achieve that, I think design and planning should always work hand in hand, right? So now, that brings us to our next discussion on how a vision is translated into experiences that create meaningful connections and leave a lasting impression. So let's start with part 2.
Okay, thank you. So thinking about, firstly, I want to sort of introduce sometimes the ways of thinking and looking at how we sort of create sort of experiences. And firstly, it's also looking at some of these trends that are happening around the world. One of them is the currency of time. As we all know, the value of our time is very expensive now. There's lots of distractions with work. How do we sort of value that, and how do brands do as well? So thinking about some of the solutions and some of the experiences that brands can focus on. Starbucks is a great example of that, where to save customers time, they create a very seamless, frictionless app to connect the customer to the product as quickly as possible. But also at the same time, they create the Starbucks Reserve stores, which is very much about creating moments where customers can spend time with the brand, create very valuable moments. And as the CEO, when we worked on the strategy for the Reserve stores, was very much creating the Willy Wonka of coffee. So creating spaces where you're really engaging customers with the love of making coffee. And as we notice when Starbucks go to when they enter new markets, barista coffee shops start popping up around the world. So I don't love Starbucks coffee, but they do actually create the coffee culture into different markets. Wealth of experience, very much around creating those elements of experience that really go beyond and very much touch the senses and emotions of customers. So great example again is Gentle Monster. It's a sunglasses store. You can never see the sunglasses because the biggest focus of the memorable part of their store is the artwork that they bring into that space. Another one more from the F&B side is and so and forth. So I went to this experience where it was 80 days around the world. So it's a Phileas Fogg type of adventure. And you're going through and it will transport you to different worlds. And in each world would be a difference of culinary delight, but it will really focus and heighten those experiences. And it's something you still remember today. And then that Flexi Trust, really focusing on communities, influencers. So Lululemon are great at doing that. So really focusing on building communities around the world, creating an ambassador program. So getting fitness freaks that love to be part and teach people, and they become part of that Lululemon experience. And you create these wonderful cultures, and you see that through other brands like Nike and Adidas doing the same thing. Pizza 4Ps are great at really showcasing the authenticity of what they do for their ingredients within their pizza restaurants, and they create sort of educational programs that really focus on the sort of farm to table story. So sometimes when we're also thinking about experiences are like a roller coaster. So you don't want it to be all the time as a high. You need those peaks and troughs. So when we think about it as well, like roller coasters, we also think films are a great example of that as well. So one is James Bond. I'm a big fan of James Bond, but the way James Bond focuses their investment on the right part of the journey of the experience of the movie. So you would always remember a James Bond by the start of the first 15 minutes, and that's where they put a high amount of their investment into the time. So Spectra created the Living Dead sort of festival in Mexico, and it would never happened before, but now that happens every year, and they still use all the props from the film. So when we're thinking about those journeys, we think about what are the frictionless save time moments. They're almost the hygiene, but they're also the backbone of the experience. But then focusing, what are those really peak, sticky, memorable moments that we really want to create those emotional engagements with people. So way to frame it as well is around experience signatures. So thinking about, like your signature, something that is unique to you and unique to the brand, and something that is then differentiated to your competitors. So our people nowadays, our audience, it's very omnichannel now. It's not just a linear journeys anymore. People are in different places. So we need to think about what are those emotional engagements, thinking about how do we engage with their dreaming mind state. So we think about areas where we want to focus on those inspiration and engagements with them. The mind states that people go through where they're looking for discovery and exploration. And then also those save time moments, again, where they just need those frictionless, easy moments with you and your experience. And then thinking of the experiences, as I said, they're an omni-channel state where now it's not just physical spaces that you go to, but people will be at home as well. So how do you engage with them as a brand? Through human service design and social groups. And then also digital and technology is now becoming such an influential part. It doesn't always now, digital and technology doesn't always have to be that frictionless experience. It can also be quite memorable as well. So thinking it as a framework, Apple is a good example of this, of how they create a very unique experience signature that is definable against all of their competitors. And a lot of phone brands try to copy them, but you still know that it's an Apple experience because the way through the physical spaces that they create strong architectural destinations, those beacons, but then it's also connected with a very strong human engagement where you've got dreaming moments of education and inspiration about what you could do with the product. You've got great service that's also connecting you through that journey, and then the frictionless space. But the backbone is always the digital as well, connecting all those different parts of that experience. So now I'll pass back to Nastita.
Okay, thank you, Kristian. Yeah, the last slide is really nice to see because you could already experience that in Manila. I think me personally, you could see a lot of designs that is very human-centric and people-led designs. So this brings us to our next panel discussion, which is what does it take to move from a compelling vision to a destination that truly works for people, business, and place? So that's our next discussion. But this question goes to Architect Mia, and I think based on the slides, the best part of it will be the wealth of experience. I want to touch base on that one.
Yeah.
But the question is, Ayala has created some of the most recognizable estates and destinations. From your perspective, what makes a master plan development feel like an authentic, lively place rather than a carefully manufactured destination?
All right. So, for instance, Makati, the Makati CBD, and perhaps later I'll touch on Nuvali. I think it goes a lot into our planning process. So when we were crafting the Makati 2050 vision plan, it wasn't just crafted in the boardroom or in our office, in the planning office. We underwent several FGDs with various stakeholders, and that included residents, the office workers, the management, the locators, the landowners, as well as the man on the street. So we had hired a brand experience expert, and his way of gathering data was really to just stop people on the street and ask them, what do you think of the Makati CBD? So that was also part of his data gathering process. And we would also have FGDs within the office. What is the experience of the Ayala Alizens? What is our experience in Makati CBD? And from there, we are able to craft the master plan, right? Which also undergoes this rigorous vetting process as well. And at the same time, when we do a master plan in Ayala, like I said, it's Makati 2050. That's comprised by several projects, action plans, programs. But within that process, there's a lot of change that happens year on year. Because as we implement projects, well, first, before implementing, we do a lot of pilot projects. Our estate, especially Makati is like the crown jewel of Ayala land. So a lot of, it also acts like an urban lab for all of us. We do test projects there. For instance, the car-free Sundays. That was just a trial last, more than a year ago. And it became so popular that a lot of LGUs, as well as other developers, have also followed suit, which we're very happy because we're really promoting that lifestyle. Okay, we're also doing. Are you familiar with the Miyawaki forest? What that is? We also did a pilot test. The Miyawaki forest is. It takes years and decades, right, to grow a forest. So the Miyawaki it's a process wherein you're able to when you plant the trees, the seedlings or the saplings. You plant them near each other so that they will compete for space. And in the process of competing for space, the trees grow much faster. So you have an instant forest. And in Legazpi Park, actually, there's a portion there where we experimented with the Miyawaki forest. And true enough, after a year or so, we have small trees na. So this experimentation also helps. And it helps us to determine what are the challenges, what are the costs. Yeah, and are we able to replicate these? No, and again, and also we get feedback all the time, especially from the estate association and the residents. No, so this is the process we have. We're very rigorous. We're very critical of ourselves, and that's why we really try to be excellent. And really try to be, and in what happened, the outcome really is we tend to become a trailblazer because we have the courage to test these things. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Architect Mia. But you also mentioned Nuvali.
Yes.
I wanted to touch base on that as well because I think we all agree that the approach of Makati versus Nuvali is quite different from one another. So we want to learn more about that.
Yeah.
If you could share.
Yeah. So. The Makati CBD, as I said, is like 60, 70 years old. It's really our old tita. Okay. But Nuvali, when it was conceptualized almost 15 years ago, it was different. it was more of a suburban central business district. And the ambition there was really to have a sustainable, at that time, the catchphrase pa was ano, eco-city. Now kasi it's more sustainable cities. No? So Ayala's very ambitious and really planned New Valley. It was quite ahead of its time then. So you know about all our floods, right, in the past few days. You know, New Valley was one of the very first estates to implement those detention ponds. Detention ponds are bodies of water that detain the rainwater and slowly releases it after the rainfall event. So if you're familiar with the lake in New Valley, that's actually a detention pond, so that the rainwater coming from the other areas pass through there. Because if you look at Santa Rosa, New Valley is actually much higher than the original poblacion. And without that lake, we would really be causing floods downstream. So aside from that lake, we also have a rainwater garden in New Valley. This rainwater garden naman, it absorbs the rainwater and replenishes the water table. You know, one of our biggest issues actually in the Philippines is the overpumping of water from the water table. We like to pump water, di ba? And then pump it to our water tanks. And you've seen that. You heard that on the news that Cavite, there's been overpumping, and that has also contributed to the floods. So one of the things that we've done in Valley, knowing that, is that to create these rainwater gardens also that absorb the water. And that's just one of it. No? So in Valley, we're really more mixed use. We've actually anticipated the future traffic generated. We thought of Makati, and so that there are really plans of a BRT there in the future. That's all been computed. And I'm quite proud because during that time, there were still no sustainability certifications. And recently, we got the 5-star Birded District certification for Valley, which for us is a validation that we're planning it right and we have implemented it correctly, according to the vision and ambition. Yeah.
Thank you, Architect Mia. Thank you. Now, my next question goes to Architect Jojo. I want to touch base on flex and trust on community building. So, Architect Jojo, building on that, as Filipino expectations evolves around more experiential spaces, how experience be built into the design from the start rather than added as another layer once architecture is already defined?
That's a very interesting question. I'll answer that in the form of how we do, what's our process in the company. First of all, I agree with you that experience mapping is not an afterthought. And in our process, mapping experience happens at the same time that we are doing our research, that we are doing the initial concepts of the project. That's very important because we see the infusion of experience as essential. It is a big driver in our design. Second is we do not draw until we're clear on what experience are we providing for a particular project. Very important. Third, there's no king in experience mapping and experience design. Everybody, all stakeholders in the project has a stake and has a contribution in coming up with the right experience and for a particular project. And fourth, we do a lot of storytelling, and that's our way of trying to identify what experience and emotions are we trying to achieve for each phase of the project. And we have a simple style. In most projects, we call it the tour dialogue, which really means that if you were a tour guide and you are introducing a project to the public, what would you say about a particular space? In the case of New Valley, what would you say about a particular estate? And as you go to the different spaces within that development, what story will you tell your audience? And to us, that is a very simple but very effective way of planning and mapping the experience for that particular project. And what we also do is we put that in plan form and in section form. So each step, each major space has a message or a story to say, and that's what drives the design. Now, one interesting project that we're recently working on is a hospital project, a major hospital. And you can imagine what sort of tour dialogue would you give to, let's say, a patient. And that's interesting. And that's, we had a lot of exchanges with the doctors, with patients, with people who have been in the hospital business for a long time. And for that particular project, the message or the conclusion that we got is when a person enters a hospital, we should take out the fear out of the person and communicate the experience that you're safe, that you'll survive, that you're in good hands. And how do you translate that in different spaces in the hospital? That's quite interesting for us. It took us about, I would say, 2 months just to align everything. But since that time, and clients like that, we went through workshops, consultations, but at the end of that exercise, everybody agreed that this is the kind of experience that we'd like for our new facility. And there's no big or small project. Every project that we do goes through that kind of an exercise.
Thank you, Architect Jojo. If I will think how to do a storytelling in the hospital, I can't think about it. So that's why you're there. Thank you so much for your service. But let's move on to Engineer Jason. I want to touch base on the currency of time that Kristian mentioned, and also about our deliverables, since you are on that field. So Engineer Jason, where do you most often see the gap between the original vision and the ultimately gets delivered on site?
Yeah. Despite the soft market we're experiencing, so we still have actually clients are undertaking, I would say, ambitious projects. So I saw the stats earlier. So construction costs have significantly increased, I think, since the onset of the war, about 15 to 20%. So naturally and inherently, value engineering has become a critical component of the project delivery process. Value engineering in its technical definition is increasing function while decreasing the cost. But for us, value engineering is not merely cost reduction. So I mentioned earlier, back to my point earlier about defining the project success. So during the outset of the project, we asked the client and the designer what are the non-negotiables, what cannot be altered, the sanctity of those non-negotiables has to be preserved. So even though we find ways to reduce cost, so that means optimizing specs, re-strategizing construction methodology, looking at various ways of procurement, packaging. So at the end of the day, those non-negotiables have to be protected. Otherwise, it might, to Architect Jojo's point, destroy the unique identity of the project, that might destroy the either the user or the customer experience of that particular project.
Thank you, Engineer Jason. Yeah, I want to touch base on value engineering. On the supplier side, it has always been a challenge for us as well. So yeah, I totally agree that in the past few years, after COVID, we all thought that there will be a shift on how people will procure or how people will consider brands coming in for their spaces. But then again, because of the geopolitical issues around the war that has been currently happening, I feel like it has been pulling us back to where we are trying to transition from. So I think this is just like a good conversation for us to happen, so that everyone is fully aware of what is currently happening. It's not all about like what Engineer Jason mentioned that it was not all about cost. It will be almost also function, longevity as well of the products, or also the items that we put into spaces. So in other words, experience isn't something that's just added at the end. It's also built into the decision along the journey. So with that, let's move on to our next discussion. So I give it back to Kristian.
Okay. Here we see. So the last part, a little bit more inspiration, I think, for this one. So we've gone through a bit of the context, and let's think about how we can potentially frame, when we were talking about experience signatures, how brands can create purpose and create memories around experiences. So one way of doing that is thinking about experience themes. So how we can create purposeful brand engagement stories around different types of themes. So one could be what we call as the campfire. So these are ones that are more educational. So like the campfire where everyone sits around telling stories and singing Kumbaya. These are the same types of experiences you can create for people that have passions. So great example again, Rafa, they create clubhouse experiences from London and around the world. And it's all about people with a passion of cycling. We've got other types of experiences, what we call the boudoir. These are ones where we want to create experiences that are a lot more higher level, a bit more exclusive. Here's an example from Paperspace, the House of Wisdom. So this was one where business leaders can come and share their wisdom, and so create these different types of experiences through this sort of place. The stage. Example from Accenture, where it's a sustainability hub. So using the platform and the building as a way of staging the experience around sustainability and really showcasing how the brand and the purpose story comes through. Good. The observatory, these are moments where we want to talk more about future thinking. So this is an example from IKEA. This is Space 10 in Copenhagen. And this is a place where they bring lots of different like-minded people together. They could be designers, the architects, they could be clients, they could be customers, but it will be around the future of living and coming up with new innovations for the future of living that might eventually become part of IKEA's production. The lab, so these are experiences where people go and play and engage and try and find their solution. So like the laboratory here in Selfridges, this is a fragrance lab where customers can go around, test and try different fragrances in a very sensorial and fun, thematic way. All the staff are wearing lab coats, and they go through and really sort of find the right fragrance for you. The campus. So again, this is a sort of an educational place. So Sonos Studios in London is an experience where you go. There's workshop areas. They have workshops where you can learn how to build speakers. They have areas where they can showcase with events. So you can have talks, you can have workshops. It's where musicians would also play gigs and also launch their latest single. The Shrine, this is a project we just finished for Adidas in Singapore. And this is very much creating a place that really becomes a pinnacle for Adidas in the region. The retreat, so like with Capita Spring in Singapore as a building, it's an area where people can detach from the work life or from the city and escape. And it could be just isolated individual detachment, or it could also be within groups and creating sort of yoga classes. The kitchen, this is where you get to play and create different solutions. So Audi City, creating from normal typical car showrooms into small tiny little flagships where there's one car, and it's all about creating your personal solution. The playground, this is M&M's in Shanghai. I designed this store about twice, I think, in different years. But it's very much about engaging new customers with the brand and creating a space where they can engage with the characters and the brand and the products in a fun way. The magic carpet, like the Sphere in Las Vegas, transports you into new dimensions. The arena, these are areas where we can really create spaces that are very much creating that competitive spirit. So SoulCycle in USA and Nike and Adidas, they're all created these type of pop-up type experiences that really get the sort of excitement around competitiveness. So I'll pass back to.
Thank you, Green Christian. So since the start of this session, we have been talking about creating spaces and creating experiences for people. But I want to discuss or that deep dive onto the creating a place that people want to return to. So my next question for this part 3 would be, what turns a place from somewhere people visit into somewhere they want to return to? So my first question goes to Architect Jojo. So my question is, how do you challenge that perception? So there's often a perception that creating more experiential destinations means spending more. So how do you challenge that perception, and how designers can create experiences that remain relevant over time by making the most available resources?
Well, let me start by saying that when I was still young in the practice, people don't talk about experience in design. But recently, you have positions like customer experience manager. You have user experience engineers. It's becoming to be a profession. Most companies now have something like this, which we call experience center. And so times have changed. And we think that creating experience does not necessarily translate to more cost. But as I mentioned earlier, the only way that you can lower cost is that it has to be deliberately infused from the very early concept of the design all the way to execution. Those who have been in the construction and design business for a long time, you know that afterthoughts are the ones that cost more. If you infuse that layer of experience at the back end of the design and the project execution process, that's expensive. But if you put that in front and infuse it in the design process, our experience is that the premium isn't that much. Now, the other thing to remember is cost is different from value. And that's what we also remind our people and our clients. Projects are designs normally are costed, but they're not valued. So we also need to learn how to strike that balance on what we design should not only be cost efficient, but it should also create value. Because sometimes for a little premium, you create very high value that becomes a differentiator of a particular project. It becomes the reason why people come and return to a particular place.
Thank you, Architect Jojo. That's very insightful. Totally agree with that one. But next question is to Architect Mia. Architect Mia, from a developer's perspective, once a development is built and occupied, what role does the developer play in keeping the community, energy, and experience alive?
Okay, so for instance, as a developer in estates like the Makati CBD, most of the lots have been sold. So actually, we turn over the CBD, right, to the estate association. But perhaps our difference is, Ayala Land's difference is, as a declarant, Ayala Land is still very active despite everything has been sold. Still very active in its commitment to its locators. So one thing I failed to mention earlier was that, because I've been talking about design, but what I wanted to say was that all these beautiful things I've been telling about, the park network, all of those, that those really give value to the lots that we sell, okay? And we ensure that when we design an estate, there's really a lot of open spaces. If you've seen other developers, they try to shy away from open spaces because it's really, some think it's expensive to maintain, or like no, but no, it actually gives value to the lots, to property. If you had a regular lot, let's say X value, if it was facing a park or a beautiful landscape, the value would be X plus certain percent. So there's really value in creating an experience, as well as I said earlier, livability. To ensure that the estate is livable, it will really create value. I forgot the question. Sorry.
How do you keep the energy and experience alive?
Yeah.
Yes.
So even if we have turned over the estate, there's an estate association. We're still very active. So you can see that in the Makati CBD. Makati CBD, as I told earlier, it has undergone several transformation over the past 50, 60 years, and it will still have transformation in the next 25 years. And you see that we're constantly reinventing ourselves, constantly, as I said, it's like an urban lab trying new things. And I guess that's it. And also remember I said before it was designed as a more of an office, all for office. And we were really designing for office workers, building owners. But now, since we have become mixed use, we really recognize that you're designing for everyone, all ages, all age groups. You can see that in the new Ayala Triangle Park, we already have a playground there, right? Yeah. And it's really multi-generational. Even what I shared earlier about the mid-block crossings, you can now cross. That's a result of our FGDs, wherein there were comments where senior citizens, mothers with prams, and even PWDs were isolated because you'd had to go to through the underpasses. So now we're really looking at inclusivity, being multi-generational, and really not being car-oriented anymore. The streets, recognizing that the streets also belong to the pedestrian and to everyone there. Yeah.
Thank you, Architect Mia. This question is for Engineer Jason. So we've talked about designing memorable experiences and sustaining them over time, but all of that starts with a successful delivering the original vision. So Engineer Jason, what's one project you've worked on where the original vision was successfully protected through delivery, and what made it possible? I think I want to ask these questions as well to Architect Judge and Architect Mia after Engineer Jason. Yeah.
One project comes to mind is the project that I worked on when I was still with the local conglomerate. So I used to be part of the PLDT group. So we actually developed an office building in Mandaluyong. So we eventually sold the strata floors to conglomerates or subsidiaries or under the MVP group. But anyway, so the design was actually approved by MVP himself. It's very hands-on in terms of look and feel of the properties that being developed by the group. But while he approved the design, unfortunately, when we went to the board to secure approval on the capex, it was cut by a certain percentage. So of course we had to be creative to find ways to deliver the project without altering, as you put earlier, the design vision. So we sat down with all the stakeholders, the design team. Of course, we optimized the specs. One advantage that worked on our favor is that given the size of the organization of the conglomerate, we leverage on economies of scale. We were able to aggressively negotiate with the contractors and the suppliers, given the buying power, I would say of the group. It also helped that the GenCon that we worked with was a partner of the group in one utility company. So having said all of that, so we were able to stick to the original vision, at the same time delivering the project actually below the original budget that we put together.
Thank you. Maybe Architect Jojo can answer that same question.
Okay, before I talk about the specific project, I forgot to mention earlier, one of the skills of designers in order for us to create experiences is the skill of empathy, meaning putting yourself in the shoes of the user and of the audience. So in our process, we from time to time create what we call empathy maps. So that maps the day in the life of the user, what's important to them, what are the several personas who will use a particular project or particular space. And one of the more memorable projects that I can remember is when we were doing the Western European headquarters of Procter & Gamble. That's in Geneva, in Switzerland. So because of that empathy mapping, what we realized, and I didn't know this until we went deeper, is that the Swiss treat their dogs as if they're part of family. More than the Filipinos. Filipinos, we treat them like children. Then they treat them like adults. What in that P&G campus, that's also the global headquarters of EAMS, the pet food manufacturer. And because we found out that the Swiss have that very unique behavior, we designed the spaces so that they can bring their dogs and their pets in the workplace. We gave them a dog yard. The restaurants were serving dog food. They can they can let their dog stay in their workstation. Now it extended more than that. In the graphic design of the space, normally in P&G there are layers of messaging, and it shows family. If we were to do this in the Philippines, it's husband, wife, and the children. But in Switzerland, there's a big picture of the dog together with the family. Just to show them that we understand you and we are going to create a unique experience that is suited for Swiss workers and Swiss people. And that's something that they appreciated. And that went on to the different spaces in that particular site. Yeah, that's one of the examples that I thought was interesting. There are many more, but that one stands out for me.
Thank you, Architect Jojo. Yes, it's very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing. Architect Mia?
I've been telling about the projects. We have almost around 30 plus estates, and each of them are very special because each and every estate that we master plan really have a different context and different solutions and different differentiating factors, differentiating features. But of course, Makati CBD would really be very memorable for me because it was almost 2 years in the planning of Makati 2050. And for me, what really was, and I'm sure you know that feeling, what is really challenging about the Makati CBD is that the estate association is almost is old, right? And when you have a development like that and you introduce changes, you have to get 100% approval of the board, right? So for me, one of the most memorable, what was really most memorable for the Makati 2050 was after so many road shows, we had to talk to all of the lot owners of the Makati CBD to get we had the deed of restrictions amended for the new changes. We introduced design guidelines because believe it or not, since it's a very old estate, it did not have design guidelines then. But you know, the reception was really great. It was really like 100% approval. And I think that shows you also the engagement of the residents and the building owners and how people are also very excited and expectant for change. And you know, after that, it had been approved by the board, by all the residents, Salcedo Village, Legazpi Village. You know, one thing we noticed in Masaya was that there were a lot of building permit applications. After that, a lot of the lot owners wanted to renovate right away and to transform their buildings using the new guidelines. No? Because we had some very exciting new features. So if you know, did you know Legazpi Village and Salcedo villages were originally designed to be residential. And that's why it looks like that. You have the park in the middle, and then you have very long blocks. The blocks were designed really for residential. So one of the things that we had introduced were what you call breezeways. No? So the lots in the middle, we allowed them now to create breezeways, meaning you can pass through na. Instead of walking the whole 300-meter block, you can cut through in the middle. And a lot of the applications were for those breezeway lots. A lot of the owners wanted to renovate, and a lot wanted to convert already to more mixed uses. No? So it's now a very exciting time for the Makati CBD. And for me, that's very special because, as an architect and a planner, when you see the reception for the master plan and I didn't craft the master plan, it's really a multidisciplinary thing. Lots of people crafted it. Actually, the whole association, estate, and the stakeholders crafted that master plan. So I think that's the satisfaction there when it's you get 100% approval there.
Thank you, Architect Mia. Of course, I wanna ask Kristian as well for him to answer this question. Any projects that you could think of, or clients or experiences that you wanted to share with us? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's one that was quite influential in my career. Lost the images. It was one that was very much like a playground experience. So the brand was called Asian Paints. It's based in India. They're very well known for being an industrial paint brand, one of the largest ones in India at the time. And we did a strategy insight at the beginning and realizing that the Indian consumer was very experienced when it comes to color, especially when it comes to what they're wearing. But when it came to actually decorating their home, they were very unconfident in color. And so when we were doing a lot of the sort of interviews, the back walls of all the interviews were all beige colored spaces. And so Asian Paints were looking to move to become the leader in home decor and color within India. So we developed 2 signature flagship stores, one in Delhi, one in Mumbai. And these were stores that were basically you would go to, and there would not be one tin of paint in that store. It would all be about inspiration, about color. And you'll go through this journey like a playground, collecting. You have an RFID card. You'll go around touching all the different things that you liked as you went through the store. And at the end, you would put the card down, and then it will create your own decor magazine with all the selections that you've done around the store. And at the back of the magazine, it will tell you where the nearest paint store was to go and get your Asian Paint solution. And they also had interior designers within that store. So I think the conversion rate from that experience, so it was a pure brand experience space, but the conversion rate was nearly 98%, 80 to 90% conversion. So it shows you where experience can bring that extra, even commercial value to the side of it as well.
Thank you, Kristian. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for coming in today.
A round of applause.